Hi, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you today to the first online meeting of this year's edition of Liderferencja. We'll be holding lectures every day for a week, not including weekends, of course. On our last day, which is on 27th of April, there will be an additional workshop and meeting with the Scandinavian companies in Olivia Business Center in Gdańsk. All of the info is available on our Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn. Today's lecture will be held in English, only today's lecture. The rest of it is in Polish. And I'm happy to inform you guys that today we have a contest for you. For everyone who asks a question during today's lecture, they will take a part in our prize draw. Together with PWN, we have prepared quite a package for you, so stay tuned. We'll talk about it later a little bit more. Today, our guests are Michał, Christian, and Tom. Christian and Tom, who are from Sweden, will tell us more about modern web development with JAMstack. I encourage you all to ask questions on the chat, and at the end of the lecture, Tom and Christian will answer them. And now I'll give the panel off to you guys so you can start the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Joanna. And thank you for having us, inviting us to do this presentation. As you said, we represent an agency in Sweden called Petra Digital Agency. And we're here to talk about creating websites with the JAMstack. A little short presentation about ourselves. I'm Christian Roscoe. I'm the enterprise architect here at Petra. I'm based in Helsingborg, Sweden. I've been working as a developer for almost 20 years. Most of that time I've been working as a developer or an architect, and mostly with CMS tools or commerce solutions. I still do some developing, but I don't do a lot of front end, so mostly back end these days. Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Tom Stevens. I have been doing websites for 20 years and working with it for 10. So I'm the lead front-end developer in our office in Helsingborg, but I'm a full-stack developer, so I do both back-end and front-end. But
Yeah, and my name is Michał Skowroński. I've been working with for the last 15 years with the .NET applications as a full-stack developer. Now on a daily basis, I work with developers in Gdańsk in Sweden on the web platforms, including designing and maintaining cloud architectures that are running it.
All right, thank you guys. Just a quick thing about this presentation. I know there's going to be a lot of lingo and a lot of three-letter acronyms that we use in the business. Maybe you don't recognize all of them, and that's fine, because neither do we half of the time, because there's so many new things happening every day. So if there's something you're a bit unsure about, just ask us. And if you don't want to ask us, just do what we do. Just Google it after the presentation is done. So a short presentation about Petra. Some quick facts. We are a little bit over 70 employees in 3 countries. Sweden, Helsingborg, where most of us sit. We also have an office in Stockholm, Sweden. Then we have an office in Helsinki, Finland, and in Poland, Gdansk. We have 9 finals and 2 Agency of the Year in Sweden. That's a branch competition that they do every year in Sweden for digital agencies, where they actually measure customer satisfaction and interview a lot of people. So we're really proud of that. Our customers like what we do in a way. We are a Sitecore Platinum partner, Episerver Solution partner, Google partner, and Backup partner. Those are the major CMSs that we actually work with. If we look at our customers, mostly these are B2B enterprises, some of them very big. Here in Sweden, SSAB, Stora Enso, Alfa Laval, you may have heard of. If you look at our size, it's kind of interesting that we work with these types of customers because they're very big. Our competitors usually are like Accenture, and they have hundreds of thousands of employees. And as I said, we're 70 people. So, I mean, we're proud of that as well. For us as developers, that means that we are involved in the entire life cycle of the project. We do planning, we do development, we do testing, we do everything. So if you compare that to working at a really, really big company, I think that gives you a lot more satisfaction at the work. Some bragging. We are probably one of Sweden's best Sitecore companies. We've won multiple awards, including Site of the Year, for the sites that we've done for SSAB, Permo, and Stora Enso. I've already mentioned the word CMS a couple of times. I don't know if everybody is on board with it, but I'm just going to quickly talk about it. CMS is a content management system. It's in the base of a lot of what we do. In its simplest form, it's where an editor can add content, text, images, publish it. Probably you're familiar with like WordPress as the most common one. We use Sitecore, Umbraco, Episerver, a couple of like bigger enterprise versions of that. But yeah, as I said, it is for editing information if you're not a developer. So you can add your image, add your headline, add your text, and publish it. You see that we have added a little headless logo up there. And that's why when we talk about CMS in the JAMstack environment, we usually use headless CMS. That means we only get the data. We don't care about all of the things around it, all of the presentation. We just want the data, and that's what we then use in the JAMstack. This is the tech stack that we use at Petra. I know this is probably a lot of names that maybe not everybody have worked with them. I would say that a couple of years ago, we were only using the net stack. That means .NET, SQL, Windows Server, Azure, and using that to build Sitecore solutions and so on. It's moved a lot more to JavaScript frameworks like React and Vue in the latest years, and languages like TypeScript and GraphQL, and then, of course, JAMstack that we're going to talk a little bit more today about. For us as a company, it's important to be in the forefront of new technologies. That has some pros and some cons. It's really fun to work with the latest technologies, but you need to do a lot of fact finding. You need to do training and education every day. I said, even though I've done 20 years in this business, I have to get up every day and learn the new stuff because there's so much happening. The problem is now when you use something brand new, it's difficult to find the Stack Overflow page to copy from. So, yeah. So, the JAMstack, what is it? The name JAMstack was defined by Netlify. That's a hosting and automation platform that's using the cloud. The name originally means JavaScript API markup, and it was as it's called JAMstack, it was a tech stack. So what does that mean? Well, JavaScript, you probably heard of. That's a browser language. It's also used today as a framework when you use React or Vue. API stands for Application Programming Interface. In this scenario, usually mean a web API. That's so you can use HTTP requests to get data from a web API. And then markup, which is, in this scenario, it's HTML served statically, hosted somewhere in a CDN. So in the simplest form, it's a static HTML page that uses JavaScript to enrich the information on it using an API. As I said in the beginning, it was like very defined as a tech stack. Nowadays, it's more of an architecture and a philosophy than this specific tech stack. But yeah, the name still stands. We might call it composable or microservices architecture. It's kind of the same thing, but yeah, the names are developing. Like all things, these definitions are kind of floating. There's no internet boss that says, "All right, this is the name for this kind of features right now." But this is more like a community of developers, and when everybody agrees, that's the name it gets, and that's what we use. Gonna say we use JAMstack for most of our projects now. I wouldn't say it's going to solve all the problems. You shouldn't use it for all projects you run into. For instance, if you have an application where a lot of things are personalized, like all of it, you don't want to use a lot of static pages. Same if you don't want to be a developer or you don't want to develop, there's still a point to actually use a stupid or normal WordPress site where you don't need to develop it. So what's the problem with the legacy web, with the applications that we were using, and why do we need to replace it? Well, if you look at the traditional web in the middle here, this is how it is today and how it used to be. This is a big monolith, as we call it. What happens is you open a browser and you type in www.mysite.com. That creates a request that goes to a web server like Internet Information Service or whatever. That does a lot of work. It checks like, all right, what website are you trying to read, or any security, other redirects, and so on. And then it sends you to your application server, a .NET application that you built, where it loads a lot of logic that you have implemented, like, all right, what should I show this person? This application server usually has dependencies to a CMS, and that has to then figure out, is there anything special that this guy should see? Is anything personalized? All of this content then comes from a database. You need to check the database and get a response and build a page, and then you send that back to the client. So that's a lot of work. And this application does everything. It not only gets the data, it has to do personalization, it has to do search indexes, it has to do workflow, marketing, automation, testing, yada, yada, yada. A lot of stuff. So that means you will have an expensive hosting, because you need a big server with a lot of CPU and raw memory and everything to do all of this. There are many points of failure. As a site developer, I can tell you some horror stories that you just want to change one small thing, and then you deploy it, and then 200 things change you didn't know about, but they were all dependent on each other. Vulnerabilities, of course, when you have everything available from the web server, like the database and stuff like that, you are vulnerable for stuff like SQL injection and so on. The database is kind of available. And if somebody does a form and does a sloppy implementation of SQL connection, somebody can do SQL injection and hurt your database. Deployments are very complex because you need to, every time you deploy a feature, you need to deploy an entire new version of the solution of your entire monolith stack. And it's difficult to optimize because, yeah, you can do some stuff with caching, and you can try to do a lot of configurations to do a lot of caching, but that is work, and you need to actually put a lot of development hours into performance optimizations. It's not just add more CPU, add more RAM. The last point here is like the CMS smell, like Michał's favorite word. It kind of, if you worked a while in the business, when you go into a website, you can almost immediately see this is a WordPress site, this is a Sitecore site, this is a EP server site, because you know the way they build, and that, yeah, it's kind of sad when you see a lot of WordPress sites are actually just the same site with a different color on it. On the other hand, then we do have the JAMstack, and that is, as I said, static files on a CDN that can be anywhere in the world, and then you have a bunch of microservices that all of them do one small thing. So if we talk about microservices or composable architecture, this is an example of a big commerce site where you see the front end, that's what the visitor actually visits. That's a static site. And then you have a bunch of different services here. You have CMS, you have a campaign service, you have a loyalty service, you have the commerce part, you have searching, and you personalize and optimize and everything. Here you can add any type of services. These are decoupled, so there's no dependencies on the front end on any of these. Of course, if they're completely offline, you won't get that data, but the site will still load, and then maybe there's a part of it that's empty, but you can still get most of the site. All of the data that comes from these services through the API are headless, so it's only the data. Anything that has to do with presentation is done in the front end. And when you develop a new microservice, or you want to change a microservice, you can do it by just changing that microservice. You don't need to deploy the entire solution. You can just build your own little cool feature that gets some information from a backend system that personalizes the content for that visitor. You don't need to deploy 100 different servers to do that. So how does this look in reality for us? As I said, it is maybe just an HTML site and a small JavaScript that gets some data from a microservice. But in our world, where we work with enterprises, it's a bit more automated. So we will deploy our code using Git. That will use a build system to actually create all of these static files, so we don't have to actually do static HTML files. You code using a framework, and then the build system creates the static files for you and upload them to CDN, or here, as I said, Application Delivery Network, ADN. When we talk about CDN or ADN, we talk about hosting that's done in the cloud. It is geographically dispersed, so it's always close to the customer, the user of the product. There are a number of them. We use Cloudflare, we use Azure, Netlify is another one. that is what makes the actual JAMstack site so fast, because as I said, it's static, it's quickly generated, and it's close to the customer. These CDNs have a lot of features like extra caching, they have security, so if you're attacked by a DOS attack or whatever, it can protect you against that. It's easy to scale. If you suddenly get 1 million visitors to your site, you can easily scale it up with a button click. It's important to try to make as much as possible static, because as I said, that's where you get the speed from. If you just add 1 million of these microservices, at some point, yeah, you're going to slow it down. It's going to be waiting for a lot of services to get the content. So try to get as much as you can static, and then rehydrate, get the data for the things that you really need to be personalized by visitor, or things like, for instance, if you do a commerce site, the stock needs to be updated every 2 seconds, so you know that you're not selling something that's out of stock already. So that's a service that you call as much as you can using JAMstack. Yeah. So what does it deliver here now? We get faster websites. We get a more secure infrastructure. We get the possibility to scale easily without adding complexity. And it does give an improved developer experience because, as I said, you can build one service at a time, and you don't need to think about how it's all dependent on other parts of the system. And I think my colleague Tom is going to go into some more details about these steps. Tom?
Yes. So why choose JAMstack? So for the security part, when using pre-generated content, we reduce the attack vectors on the site greatly. Since before, if an attacker wanted, they could try to do SQL injection on any side page on the site and might success in bringing the site down. But when we only serve static HTML, there is no access to the critical infrastructure of the site. And so the attack vectors are limited to just the APIs, the microservices. And it's easier to harden a few of the microservices than the complete solution. And also, if one of the microservices will get overloaded or go down, the whole site won't crash. Whereas if we had like a monolithic approach, as described before, if one thing crashed in there, the whole site would go down and the visitor wouldn't be able to visit it at all. And the next slide. And for scaling, since it's only static content, it can live in a CDN networks around the globe. So it's always close to the visitor. For example, if we had the standard approach with a server in, say, Netherlands, and a visitor comes from Australia, that would be a 300 millisecond ping just to get the content started there. And then transfer images takes a long time. But instead, if we have it statically served on CDN, the visitor would get the data from a CDN server in Australia, and it would be instant. And the serving static content is much cheaper as well, since it doesn't require as much CPU power, RAM, etc. And also it is redundant. So since the content lives all around the globe, if one data center goes down, the visitor will still get their data from the next one that is close by. And this performance goes in a bit into scale, but if we take a normal visit on a site, we measure the time to first byte, how fast the server will start to send out the web page, and we always want to keep that around 100 milliseconds or below. But that is very hard when we generate all the content on a page for each request. And since everything already is generated, the CDN can reply with the first byte after like a millisecond. That makes a great deal to the visitor. And maintainability is also a very big part, since in the monolithic approach, we have a large cluster of servers that we need to maintain, make sure that they're running well, look at the log files. Is the database running bad, needs optimization? When everything is generated, we don't have to care about big servers and maintaining them. And we also don't need to deploy. It's too fast.
Right.
Yeah, we don't need to deploy the full environment just to update a single thing. So if we just want to update a single service, we can just deploy that little part and not the whole site. And that makes a is that we can take our generated content and we can put it on any CDN we want to. We can put it on Cloudflare, on Azure, Akamai, Netlify. There are numerous different CDN providers, and we can just take our static content and put it out there. And we have a freedom to mix and match the different services. We don't have to lock us down to a single infrastructure. If we want to run one of our microservices on Azure, we can do that. Then we can run another on Amazon's AWS. We can spread out everything. That is what is so nice. And then from a developer experience, the next slide. There are many tools and technologies available. So the front end can be built in React or Vue or any of the frameworks that are derived from them, such as Nuxt and Next, Gatsby. There are a lot of different frameworks that can be used, and tools as well. And also decoupling the front end and back end, it can lead to faster development cycles, since we can have front end developers that create the front end and maintain it, and we can have a team that can builds the back end, and they don't have to care about each other any more than when they need to share the details of how they should work. The front end should talk to the back end, but otherwise the front end developers can build with mock data, just create the whole, and create the site and run it without needing the full backend. Since developing for a server with, for example, Sidecar, it's really intensive for the computer to run, and that's not needed if you decouple the front end and back end. So that is very good. Yes.
All right. Michał will say a few words about your real examples.
Right. Yes. We just want to show you a basic draft of an architecture of the very simplistic static site, just to visualize a little bit what was said before about JAMstack. So today we will just briefly go through the high-level building blocks of example constellation of different frameworks. Here are our favorite ones, but of course, like Tom said, there are many others. And we'll look a little bit more under the hood on our upcoming workshop on 27th of April. So so in this example, this is actually the rendering of the one side that we're working on it right now. Is powered by Nuxt.js. The Nuxt.js is a Vue framework that is based on Vue and actually helps you to generate static HTML, static sites. And in this case, also it's a headless CMS. We like Umbraco. Umbraco is a .NET CMS. You can say it's a WordPress in .NET world, so it's open source and very friendly. And there's also another logo showed, which is Tailwind CSS. It's a kind of new Bootstrap framework that we also very like. And the GraphQL is a query language for data endpoint that is used as a two-way communication channel between JavaScript and the backend. So the most characteristic, most important feature of this architecture is that all website with all its structure is rendered ahead of the time and uploaded as a static HTML to desired hosting. As Tom said, there are many different versions of the hostings, and usually these tools gives developer a very easy way. Actually, it's like a one-liner to deploy the websites to your favorite hosting, whatever is the cheapest or you like the most. So when a visitor asks the page, if someone goes to the browser, it will actually instantly get the materialized page without spinning any databases or complex architecture, which is quite nice, right? But also there are some more complex scenarios, like setups where you need personalized data, shopping baskets, interactive content, animations, and so on. So someone can ask question, how is that solved? So UI components such as these are initially rendered by the server as a static HTML, but also contain specific logic that is downloaded as an additional JavaScript to the client and is executed in the browser. That could be fetching additional data through API and making sites very smooth and animated and interactive. And that process is called hydration. It's another buzzword. So as you can see here, the Nuxt is our rendering engine, but of course there are a lot of other great engines already mentioned. React was mentioned, but there's also a SvelteKit. It's another beast in the front-end world, which is not a JavaScript framework, but also compiler. We will provide the links in the final slides so you can read more about it and choose your favorite framework that you like. So we have static pages which are hosted on the server on some hosting, which gives us pretty much instant, fast website. We don't need to run any database servers or maintain any complex architecture. But how about if you want to change a little bit of the content on the site? So how we do that? The photo you see, it's a screenshot of CMS that we explained before. CMS helps you to edit the site for your content for your site, edit content and other functionality. So on our upcoming workshop, we will show you how to hook up the headless CMS. In this case, it's Umbraco, and how we actually can close the whole circle of publishing the content. So in JAMstack architectures, CMS usually exposes the data through JSON using REST or GraphQL endpoint. You will see a little bit how it looks. So when you develop as a backend developer, like in .NET, you actually only care about producing that data endpoint. So you don't render any HTML. So part of half of your job is actually not there. So you have more time for fun stuff, and you developed additional branches of that query language, providing all the data that frontend will need for rendering. So on the front end side, this is the example of the Visual Studio Code, when you have a Nux project, you develop your front end as a component. So it's also different than doing HTML markup back in the day. So you have component-based design and create the UI that then actually fetches the data endpoint in JavaScript, and that data that you get from your endpoint you mix with your HTML in a dynamic way, having the new articles and fresh content. And as I said before, Nux like JS and some other engines, actually most of them, they have built one-line methods for building and compiling that code into ready HTML pages that can actually run in two modes. One is dynamic, one is static, but we most interested in the static one. And you can send it right away from your developer machine to the hosting in hosting of your choice. In real life, this is also handled by continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. That's typically when things are on production and out there in the field, then this is handled automatically by let's say Azure DevOps pipelines. Yeah, so I think it's back to you, Christian.
We've talked a lot about different words, different scenarios, and I know it can be hard if you haven't worked with this before. There was a lot of things to learn. We have some useful links here. The JAMstack org is where the official JAMstack discussions are being held and stuff presented. Mac Alliance, it is a collection of companies that believe very strongly in this architecture, and they actually have set up a bunch of rules. So if you follow all of the rules, you can be part of the Mac Alliance. We're not, because they are kind of very, very, very strict, and I think we believe that sometimes you don't follow everything that they have in their rules. Netlify, as I mentioned in the beginning, they were actually the first ones that coined the phrase JAMstack, and they're still very much leading the development here, and they have a very good platform for optimization and hosting your JAMstack solution. JAMstack Conf, Michał, I actually don't know what JAMstack Conf is. That's one of yours. Maybe Michał is muted.
I am muted. It's just a conference, JAMstack conference, recurring, so that then you can also check it out. If I think they're also streaming online.
Yeah,
that's what the.
Nux.js and Next.js, as we mentioned, is site generators and .NET frameworks that you can use. Find what you like. Kidsvelte, cool site, check it out. There's a lot of information on development. The workshop.
I can take this. During the workshop, we are in 1 week we'll be in Gdańsk, and we'll try to together, me and Christian, go through more details on JAMstack, based on some examples implemented in commercial solutions, and focusing also on the composable architecture / microservices. And I think we will try to bring something to life, mini hello world of the discussed technology stack, creating simple Nux.js application that is talking together with headless CMS. And all of it will be in quite relaxed atmosphere, and we'll just try to learn something new and to get to know each other.
Somebody mentioned beer as well. So
yeah, there will be beer.
I think that's all that we have prepared for you today. Thank you so much, Michał, Christian, and Tom, for your interesting lecture and for being our guest today. Thank you, everyone, for joining our stream today, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And the recording from this lecture will be available on our YouTube channel, so you're welcome to watch it again. I want to remind you about the workshop on April 27th. There will be additional meeting and workshop to today's lecture in Olivia Business Center in Gdańsk. And about the contest today, we'll contact the winners of today's prize draw. So stay tuned and don't forget about tomorrow's meeting. Also at 7 p.m. you'll find the link to the stream on our Facebook page. In case of any further questions, feel free to contact us. And thank you again for participation and see you. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.